Okay, we're going to try this again. I did a couple other takes this morning, but I wasn't quite awake yet. I guess I really do need that cup of coffee or two before I start doing something like this. I just want to go ahead and start off by reading something I've written that's on the About page for the website. And this really explains my stance about education, I guess. Everything I've written, everything I've created that some see as new and radical stems from this simple illustration. A simple illustration that represents the concept that a separation of four things exists for everyone. Gender shown as the brain, orientation shown as the heart, sex shown as the genital area, and gender expression that I prefer to call self-expression. One does not determine any of the others, but no person exists who doesn't have all four in some way. That is the underlying concept of the gender-bred person, widely circulated, widely known. A simple concept put into a simple illustration so that any child could understand, but many people still don't. In any of my writings, in anything I've created, I've never deviated from this basic truth. A truth that ties us all, not a truth that separates us. In order to find the answers we need to the issues that face us, it's imperative to see each of these things for what they are. The only way that we can do this is to separate them when speaking of them. Excuse me. No longer can we interchange the words gender and sex as if they have the same meaning. No longer can we mistake gender expression for gender identity if we wish to resolve issues that are in fact easy to resolve. We must speak with a common language so that there is a universal understanding within the conversations that must happen. I believe that to be very true. I just went and spoke at MCC, a college here in New York. And they had told me beforehand, we've had some safe zone training, and this training was for the resident advisors, and so I was speaking to all the resident advisors of Monroe College, and they had just had safe zone training, and they were excited, as most people really are, about the transgender piece. That's where the confusion is. That's where the questions are. And anybody that wishes to learn, that's usually the place that they want to learn, is within that piece. But unfortunately, it's not being taught correctly. And this was yet another case where safe zone training was given, and I was called after the fact to offer clarification or make corrections or fill in the blanks for training that is very lacking. That evening, I had a meeting, and in that meeting, we were discussing more safe zone training that is going to happen in the future. Things that are being scheduled, groups that are interested, and it's all wonderful things. Training, education is a wonderful thing. I've never actually done safe zone training. I've been brought in after the fact a few times to talk about the transgender piece. But I've never actually given safe zone training myself. So I asked, what are you still using the gender-bred person? And the answer was, well, sometimes not. And that concerns me. It needs to be used. And then I asked, what are you teaching when you use it? And the answer was, well, it explains sexual diversity. I was appalled by that answer. Absolutely appalled. And so, very quickly I whipped out my notepad and drew my person, as I do, and listed gender, sexuality, sex, and expression. and went through and explained the concept. And I said, if you're focusing on sexuality, then you're focusing on the wrong thing, because what this is supposed to be focusing on is gender. And if you don't understand gender, then you cannot possibly understand transgender. To focus on sexuality, you're still talking about the LGBT piece. You're still talking about things pertaining to sexuality. When you attribute that to training about transgender, well, now you've completely gotten off the tracks. And it's no wonder that I'm brought in afterward to correct that, to explain that again. I feel like very often the person at the end of a parade with the big sweep broom walking behind the elephant trying to clean up the mess that has been made. Where what we should be doing is teaching this stuff correctly to begin with. I cannot be everywhere. So we need to be, within Safe Zone, we need to be teaching the right things. The training, the attitude, the perspective needs to change, and it needs to change very, very soon. Now, the last time I spoke with you, I talked about the genderbread concept, just explaining the genderbread concept, because I do find that people are just not using it correctly. And I find really it's the only thing you really need to even have up. If you have just that simple graphic up, and even if you walk into a classroom, you can just draw it on the chalkboard and just start talking about these different things, and then explain the four things. Start breaking them down. That's what I did the last time we spoke, and I didn't finish on sexuality. I moved on. I got to an aspect that is kind of the elephant in the room, but I never went into it, and the reason I didn't go into it is because it deserves some time and explanation to go through it. And that piece is sexual fantasy. And so that's what I'm going to be talking about today. I'm going to be talking about sexual fantasy, and what is that, really? Now again, being transgender, gender itself does not determine your sexuality. It doesn't determine your sexuality being cisgender any more than it does being transgender or anything else. Your gender is not going to determine whether you're gay, straight, or bi. It just doesn't. That's just your sexuality, that's your orientation, completely separate thing. So it needs to be discussed separately. I had mentioned cross-dressing and then decided to move on the last time. Now, when I was speaking at MCC, I was inviting questions. I love questions. And one of the questions asked me was asked very well, actually. This was a girl sitting in the audience, and she has a friend who is transgender female. And she asked if the notion of fetish is often placed on me, because she has a friend who experiences that. Her friend is transgender, and people typically think of fetish, sexual fantasy, when they think of her, and so the question to me was, do you experience that as well? And the answer is yes. Yes, very often, because there's that really is the largest confusion. Now, rather than just answering yes, because I teach, I didn't just stop there. I went through and explained, and I asked my audience, do you care if I talk about sexuality for a little while in a very open way? And, there was a little hesitation, but there was enough nodding of yes, and I figured this is a college, you're adults, you can deal with it. So, very quickly I just went through, and explained that every one of us, it doesn't matter who you are, every one of us develops some sort of sexual fantasy in order to achieve orgasm. We all do it. Every one of us. It's that it, you know, sometimes it's something, it's just something to get you there, and sometimes it's just at the end. You know, it's right at the hump. You're no longer sleeping with the person you're with. You're sleeping with somebody that you find extremely attractive. You know, we create these little fantasies in order to achieve orgasm. That's why we do it. That to create that arousal that reality just doesn't quite give us. Well, for most of us, it's an internalized fantasy. You know, sleeping with somebody and, you know, thinking about somebody else. It's, or, you know, just whatever my particular little sexual fantasy is, just to get me over that hill. When a sexual fantasy becomes externalized, when it becomes something outside just the internal, we label it fetish. That is what a fetish is. Anything, it's an externalized sexual fantasy. Now, this is what typically cross-dressing is. I know that there's a lot of people out there that term themselves cross-dresser because they're not sure another label, I guess. But I'm going to give this definition. Many will probably disagree, but I'm going to give this definition. Cross-dressing for males is an externalized sexual fantasy and does enter that definition of fetish. Now, with any fetish, or any sexual fantasy for that matter, they need to be altered. You can't kind of hold the same exact fantasy for your entire life. Maybe some can. Most people don't. Most people, we change it up a little bit. You may have, you know, a sexual fantasy that's kind of categorized in one little area, but we tend to change it up. Just to kind of keep it new, keep it fresh, keep it exciting, because if it's not exciting, then it's not going to do its job anyway. With the externalized sexual fantasy, that happens as well. It has to change up. It has to move. It has to remain exciting, or it's not going to work. And so sometimes these fetishes turn into almost an addiction. It's like within an addiction, well, that small thing I did isn't quite doing it for me anymore. I got to go broader. I got to go larger. I got to go extreme, and continue to go more and more extreme in order to get that same fix. Bringing it back to the addiction analogy. And so that's why within if you were to type in, cross-dresser clothing into Google, and you would come up with images of these extremes, these vast extremes. 7-inch platform heels that no woman in her right mind would wear. Eyelashes that come 3 feet away from your face. It becomes more within the extreme. And extreme itself, it's a exaggeration of femininity rather than a more of an accurate, stereotype of what is something a woman might wear. But that is because it needs to grow, and it needs to remain exciting. Well, these heels were cool, so I'm going to get the bigger heels, and bigger, whatever the crazy thing is. And I say crazy. I shouldn't. I'm not saying that these things are crazy, but because I'm not placing judgment. I'm just trying to explain what is. Now, that doesn't make you transgender. we've rolled, historically, anything, like I said before, anything gender variant, we just slapped a label of transgender on it because we didn't know what else to do. Oh, yeah, transgender. But, just because you put on, a guy puts on a dress doesn't make their gender female. Just because a woman puts on male clothing doesn't make her male. This is just gender expression is all it is. It's just that within cross-dressing it is typically a sexual fantasy. It becomes a fetish. I was asked, it was an online question, why is it okay for girls to wear guys' clothes and not get any flack, and not okay for guys to wear girls' clothes? And the reason being is because of what I'm talking about. It's seen as something sexual. When a girl puts on male clothing, it's not seen as something sexual. When a male puts on women's clothing, it is seen as something sexual. And it's that sexuality that people get hung up on. Within our Western culture, sexuality is seen as sin. And it's true. It doesn't. It goes beyond being gay, lesbian, or bi. It goes into the straight realm as well. And we're taught that sexuality is bad. Having sex is bad. Keep it secret. Don't say you have had. Don't admit that you like it, for God's sake, because it's all sin. And there's this underlying teaching that we've all been taught, and so we carry that with us. There's that shame level that comes with sexuality. So yeah, that's the reasoning. Why is it okay for girls to wear guys' clothes and not okay for guys to wear girls' clothes? That's where it comes from, because we attribute the guy wearing girls' clothes to sexuality. Sexuality is seen as wrong, regardless of who you are. We carry that as, it's kind of a it's a deep-seated thing. It's not even something that's usually conscious, but we tend to do it anyway. So yeah. Anyway, I think I'm done with that conversation. That's kind of the elephant in the room. But again, going back, there's reasons that being transgender is thought of as asexuality. And this is the largest reason, because cross-dressing is termed to be transgender. Drag performances, which are, typically, for the female performances, 90% of drag performers are gay males and would identify as that, but then are also termed transgender, which is something that most of them don't like or agree with. We need to really, as best we can, start separating out sexuality from being transgender. I dislike the attachment within the acronym. And it's not to say that support can't be found there within the LGBT. It can. But it also creates confusion. And, with that attachment within the acronym, it just reinforces that idea that being transgender is a sexuality. But we have to start really focusing on what is transgender, and the key word is gender. So when we are teaching what it is to be transgender, we have to focus on gender. And just last thing, because my voice is going out, being transgender is not a sexuality. I can like guys, girls, or sock puppets, or anything else, just like anyone else. Cisgender people is not a sexuality either. And it's the same thing. These two things are equated. You can equal one to the other. You can equal cisgender to transgender very easily. And neither one of these things are a sexuality. Our sexuality is separate. Our sexuality is individual. And when we bring these four things together, this is what creates our individuality. You know, I may be female in my gender, but I like girls, and I like, or whatever the case may be, whatever the combination is. I enjoy self-expression, changes constantly. And so these four things come together to create our particular individuality. But all four of those things exist. We share in common much more things, I guarantee it, than we have any kind of difference. And when we look at the things individually as four individual things and talk about them individually, then it becomes more clear that we all share these things. And that's all I have for you today. So I will talk to you later, and you have a wonderful day.